1976. The Eagles are at the peak of rock stardom and on the edge of self-destruction. Drugs, pressure, and creative tension threaten to tear them apart, but out of that chaos comes a song that changes everything. 6 minutes long, mysterious lyrics, a guitar solo that sounds like a highway to infinity. Critics didn't understand it. Fans couldn't stop playing it. It became the anthem of an era and the weight that nearly crushed the band. This is the untold story of how Hotel California made the Eagles immortal and almost broke them in the process. By the mid-70s, the Eagles were living every musician's dream, or so it seemed from the outside. Their albums topped charts, their tours sold out, and their songs dominated radio. But behind the scenes, the picture was far from glamorous. The success that made them superstars also chained them to an endless cycle of pressure, expectation, and internal tension. The group that once bonded over harmonies was now cracking under the weight of fame. Money was flowing, but so were the problems. Arguments erupted during rehearsals, fueled by clashing egos and creative disagreements. Don Henley and Glenn Frey, the band's central figures, were determined to push the Eagles into new artistic territory, away from pure country rock and into something bigger, darker, more ambitious. Not everyone agreed, and every session felt like a battle for control. What once felt like friendship was slowly turning into a Cold War fought with words, silence, and, at times, violence. And then there were the temptations. The success of the Eagles came during one of the most decadent periods in rock history. Cocaine wasn't a secret, it was part of the culture, flowing backstage and in recording studios. The long nights of writing and recording blurred into hazy marathons of excess. The pressure to deliver another hit album only made the spiral worse. What should have been the high point of their careers became a dangerous game of survival. The band was burning out. The relentless touring schedule left no time to breathe, let alone heal old wounds. Personal relationships within the group were fraying, and the media was starting to sense blood in the water. Rumors of a breakup swirled. Every interview was a performance, every press photo a mask hiding the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Still, amid the chaos, they knew the next album had to be a masterpiece. Failure wasn't an option, it would mean the end. In the middle of this storm, the Eagles decided to gamble everything on a bold new sound. Something darker and more mysterious than anything they had done before. They weren't just making another record, they were building a statement that would define an era. Out of that ambition came an idea that would make history and nearly destroy them in the process. The spark for Hotel California didn't begin in a luxury studio, it began on the road, between exhaustion and ambition. While the Eagles were touring relentlessly, Don Henley and Glenn Frey started talking about what the next record should represent. They were tired of being labeled as just a country rock band. They wanted something grander, something that reflected the dark side of success, the emptiness behind the glitter. The California dream was changing, and they wanted to capture that shift. The concept was simple but dangerous. A song that told a story, a metaphor for excess, temptation, and spiritual decay. Don Henley described it as a journey from innocence to experience. It wasn't just music anymore, it was social commentary wrapped in a haunting melody. They imagined a track that sounded like the desert at night, wide, mysterious, and unsettling, with beauty and menace coexisting in every note. Guitar ideas began to flow. Don Felder, the quiet but brilliant guitarist, sent the band a demo with a hypnotic chord progression inspired by a combination of Latin rhythms and classic rock textures. It had an otherworldly quality, smooth yet menacing, calm yet full of tension. Henley and Frey heard it and instantly knew. This was the foundation of their vision. They took the skeleton of that idea and began building lyrics that would make it immortal. The writing sessions were intense. Every line was scrutinized, every metaphor debated. Welcome to the Hotel California sounded inviting at first, almost warm, but the words that followed painted a darker picture. This wasn't just a hotel, it was a trap. a symbol of fame's seductive prison. Henley later said, "It was about the dark underbelly of the American dream and about our own lives." The song wasn't pointing fingers outward, it was a mirror held up to the band itself. By the time the lyrics and music started to merge, they knew they had something extraordinary, but they also knew the weight it carried. This wasn't just another track, it was a defining moment in their career. The dream of California was no longer golden, it was fractured, shadowed, and dangerous. And in that shadow, the Eagles created the song that would make them legends and set the stage for their greatest struggles. Turning Hotel California from an idea into a masterpiece was anything but simple. The Eagles entered Criteria Studios in Miami and later moved to Los Angeles with an almost impossible goal: to make an album that sounded as big as their ambition. Every note, every lyric, every harmony was dissected until it met their standard of perfection. And perfection came at a price: long nights, clashing egos, and a relentless pursuit of something that didn't even exist yet. Don Felder's haunting guitar progression was the backbone, but building the rest was a war of patience. Henley obsessed over the tone of every drum hit. Glenn Frey pushed for precision in the arrangements. Joe Walsh, the newest member, added his trademark edge, blending playful energy with technical brilliance. The pressure was suffocating, yet the music kept evolving, growing darker, richer, and more layered with every take. They weren't just recording a song, they were sculpting an experience. Then came the lyrics, and with them, endless debate. How do you write a story that feels surreal yet real? Henley wanted the words to evoke mystery without sounding pretentious. Lines like "You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave" became instant poetry, cryptic, chilling, and unforgettable. Every phrase was a brushstroke, painting the illusion of paradise and the trap that lurked beneath. By the time the vocals and harmonies were laid down, the track had become something beyond even their expectations. But the crown jewel was the ending, the guitar solo. 2 minutes of musical storytelling, crafted in a single perfect take by Joe Walsh and Don Felder. It wasn't just a solo, it was a dialogue, a duel, a final exclamation point on a song that defied categorization. That solo would go on to be ranked among the greatest in rock history, a piece of music that seemed to soar endlessly into the desert night. When the final mix played through the speakers, the room fell silent. The band knew what they had created wasn't just a hit, it was an anthem. But they also knew something else. This song was heavy. It carried not just ambition, but pressure, expectation, and a mirror of their own chaos. They had captured lightning in a bottle, but what happens after lightning strikes? From the moment Hotel California hit the airwaves in late 1976, it captivated millions, but it also left them baffled. The melody was hypnotic, seductive even, and the arrangement flowed like a dream. But the lyrics? They sounded like riddles whispered in the desert wind. On a dark desert highway, "Cool wind in my hair," the opening line transported listeners instantly, painting a vivid image. Yet with every verse, the questions grew louder. Who was the woman at the doorway? What was this hotel that welcomed guests so warmly and trapped them forever? The more people listened, the deeper the mystery became. Then came the wildfire of speculation. Rumors spread in bars, on radio shows, and in newspaper columns. Some swore the Eagles were singing about a real place, a glamorous, haunted hotel hidden somewhere in California. Fans made pilgrimages to luxury resorts, convinced they had found the real Hotel California. Others believed the lyrics masked something darker, an allegory for drug addiction, a descent into hell, even a satanic cult. Religious groups protested, claiming the song was evil. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories thrived in the vacuum of answers, giving the track an almost mythical status. The song's most chilling line, "You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave," became a cultural obsession. To some, it was sinister, like a voice from the afterlife. To others, it perfectly described fame, the seductive dream that turns into a gilded cage. It wasn't just a lyric, it was a warning dressed as poetry. Henley and Frey fueled the fire by refusing to give a simple explanation. The ambiguity wasn't accidental, it was their weapon. Don Henley later admitted they wanted the song to feel like a surreal journey, open to interpretation, layered with meaning. It was about excess, he said, about the dark underbelly of the American dream. And that was the truth. California had been the land of hope and sunshine, the symbol of success. But for those who lived at the top, the reality was different. Drugs, greed, and broken promises. The Eagles weren't preaching morality, they were confessing their own sins. The hotel was never real. It was a metaphor for temptation, for illusions that sparkle and then suffocate. Fame looked like freedom until the doors closed and you realized you were trapped in your own creation. That mystery gave Hotel California its immortality. Songs that give answers fade, songs that raise questions live forever. Every time you listen, you hear something new, a detail in the guitar, an echo in the harmony, a line that suddenly hits harder than before. And maybe that's the ultimate genius of this track. It was never meant to be solved. It was meant to haunt you, to linger like a dream you can't wake from. Decades later, it still does. When Hotel California was released in late 1976, it didn't just top the charts, it detonated like a cultural bomb. The single climbed to #1, and the album dominated worldwide sales, moving millions of copies and rewriting the rules of rock success. The track won the Grammy Award for Record of the Year in 1978 and cemented the Eagles as the undisputed kings of American rock. It was more than a song, it was an anthem, a mirror held up to the seductive chaos of fame. But behind the shimmering curtain of triumph, something darker was unfolding. With success came an avalanche of pressure. The Eagles were no longer just a band, they were a brand, an empire expected to deliver perfection every time. Fans demanded bigger tours, labels demanded bigger hits, and the media wanted stories of glamour, not dysfunction. The result? A relentless cycle of work, fame, and indulgence that no one could sustain. What began as celebration morphed into something toxic. Limousines replaced cars, private jets replaced buses, and cocaine replaced sleep. In every city there was a party. In every party, a line of powder waiting. The irony was brutal. They had written a song warning about excess and entrapment, yet they had walked straight into the very cage they described. Don Henley later admitted, "We were living the very thing the song warned about." The tours stretched endlessly. The nights grew longer, and the relationships grew colder. Arguments became a daily ritual over set lists, over solos, over who controlled the band's vision. Henley and Frey's perfectionism, which had once been their strength, became a weapon. They fought over mixes for hours, turning recording sessions into battlegrounds. Every decision was war. The studio became a pressure cooker. Sessions for the follow-up album were grueling, with overdubs stacking into the early morning while tempers flared. What should have been creative magic turned into psychological warfare. Joe Walsh tried to diffuse tension with humor, but even his antics couldn't drown out the rising storm. Add to that an endless supply of drugs, and the formula for disaster was complete. By the late 70s, the Eagles were no longer just fraying, they were unraveling. Threats flew, fists almost did, and lawyers hovered like vultures. Then came the breaking point. In 1980, during a benefit concert in Long Beach, years of resentment boiled over in front of thousands of fans. Band members exchanged threats on stage, muttering into microphones and glaring across the lights. Hours later, the Eagles collapsed, burned out, broken, and bitter. The song that had given them immortality had also set the stage for their destruction. They had conquered the world, but the cost was staggering. Hotel California wasn't just a masterpiece. It was a prophecy they couldn't escape. When the storm inside the Eagles finally broke them apart, one thing remained untouched: the song. Hotel California didn't just survive the chaos, it thrived. becoming a timeless monument of rock. Even as the band fell silent in the early 80s, their music echoed louder than ever. Fans kept the record spinning, radio stations refused to let it fade, and the haunting chords of that intro became part of rock's DNA. Over the years, the song's legend only grew. It climbed every ranking of greatest songs of all time, cemented itself on classic rock playlists, and earned a place in the Grammy Hall of Fame. That hypnotic guitar solo, played in perfect harmony by Don Felder and Joe Walsh, became one of the most celebrated in history, an emotional climax that still gives chills decades later. It wasn't just a solo, it was storytelling without words. A dialogue of 6 strings that said everything fame, loss, and longing could not. When the Eagles reunited in 1994 for their Hell Freezes Over tour, Hotel California was the centerpiece of every show. The applause when those opening chords rang out was deafening, a roar that reminded the band why they had endured so much. It had stopped being just their song. It now belonged to the world. In stadiums filled with fans from different generations, the lyrics hit with the same power as in 1976. Digital platforms brought yet another rebirth. By the 21st century, Hotel California had crossed every boundary, streamed billions of times, covered by artists across genres, and studied as a masterpiece of composition and narrative. The song became more than music. It became a cultural artifact, proof that the right melody and the right words can outlive trends, scandals, and even the band that created them. Today, nearly 50 years after its release, Hotel California remains a symbol, a warning, and a masterpiece. A story of beauty and danger, wrapped in harmonies and 6 strings. The song that once almost destroyed the Eagles ended up defining their immortality. And every time that opening riff drifts out of a radio, it doesn't just play a song, it opens the doors of a hotel that no one ever truly leaves. Hotel California was never just a hit single. It became a cultural mirror, a soundtrack to ambition, excess, and the high price of chasing the dream. It immortalized the Eagles in a way few songs ever could, transforming their triumphs and failures into an anthem that still resonates decades later. Every chord carries a warning. Every lyric feels like prophecy. Which line still gives you chills today? Which part takes you back to that first time you heard it? If you believe some songs never die, hit subscribe and join us as we uncover more stories behind the music that changed the world. Because legends like this are never just written in words, they live in sound.